Danish trio Kollapse released one of the most intense and discordant metal albums of 2024 with their third LP, Ah. Built around growling bass lines, extreme dynamics, and roaring vocals, the group's sound lies somewhere between noise rock, sludge, and post-metal. Kirk Horton interviews vocalist and guitarist Peter Clement Lund and bassist and vocalist Thomas Martin Hansen for a track-by-track analysis of the band's latest record. This is a Screen Blast Repeat exclusive interview.
Okay, so it's your third album, and it starts with a title track. So this is track number 1. It's 46 seconds long, and it really does set the scene, doesn't it? Because you've got this ear-piercing feedback, distorted bass from you, Thomas, and there's some like masculine scream vocals in there. So even though it's only 46 seconds, there's actually quite a lot going on in this, isn't there? What was your intention to just start with a piece like this?
I think it's just to set a tone for the album. I was dealing with some depressing stuff when we went to the studio, and just the lyrics for the first track kind of I tried to hit something on the nail on the head, and I think I succeeded. It was a pretty rough time, so I wanted the music to reflect that. So I just recorded, I think, 2 bass tracks for it, with just me feeding back. And I actually wrote the lyrics for me and Peter to do it, and we didn't know how to do it to make it sound really good. So we did my take and Peter's take, and none of us heard each other's takes, and it hasn't been edited in any way. So the timing and the speed and the delivery of the vocals are very different, but it really works. So Peter wasn't even in the room when I recorded my stuff, and we listened to it in the studio afterwards, and it sounded fantastic. Yeah, kind of an interesting way to work, I think.
Yeah, it was very much like a spur of the moment thing, because we talked a bunch, like, how are we gonna open the record? Like, do we want like a song to kick in? Do we want something moody to kick in? And then I remember let's just start the record with a bunch of feedback. And Thomas like went in front of the amp, which was insanely loud, and just like the whole take is just those 2 bass takes on top of each other, no editing, nothing done, no cuts. And I remember he recorded those 2 takes, we put them on top of each other, and then we went into the control booth, and all 3 of us listened to it, and producer Jakob, and we just looked at each other and said, what the fuck is that? And that was just it, and we wanted it. And like, and as Thomas said, the vocals, like, he wrote the stuff. I left the studio. I went into the kitchen, and then they came out and got me when Thomas was done. They muted his vocals, and I did my take, just 1 take as well. And then we listened to the whole thing, and it was like completely all over the place, and I think we all just immediately knew, okay, this is definitely the only way we want to start this record.
Yeah, it's a hell of a statement. So that brings us on to track number 2, Autophagia. So I'm just looking at my notes for this. So I noted the unmelodious arpeggio at the beginning, and that kind of invites the bass and drums, doesn't it, to like circle it in an agitated groove. I put, though, it's in this voice that unleashes its worst horrors of the mind. It's really unsettling. What guitar tuning are you playing in for this, Peter?
This is just a drop C tuning. So there's nothing really fancy about the tuning. It's just I think when I wrote this, I was very determined to, let's just find a really ugly chord and then turn that into a song. I think the whole thing, as you say, the song sort of revolves around that one chord that just gets it's basically the one thing I play through most of the song. I think when we wrote it, we were very sort of we were very focused on trying to make a track where everybody played very much against each other. We
Yeah.
didn't want to play together, so we wanted to play like in almost opposite directions, and so it just has this, like you said, this arpeggiated, really dissonant chord that just keeps repeating, and then everything else, all the dynamics revolve around how the bass and the drums sort of try to pick up on that sort of discordant chord. And then there's a few variations just to like, because I couldn't just play the same thing for the whole song, but like I think that was it was that chord, and I think this was also the first song we wrote, and then we all went, okay, now we know which way the record is going. Like
Definitely.
we wrote a bunch of songs when we were trying to figure out, but we ended up throwing them all away. And then we came up with this, and it was like the sort of whole structure of the song was one rehearsal, and then it was basically finished. And then we sort of spent some time figuring out all the details and stuff. But it was very much when this happened, we all know, okay, this is how we're supposed to do it now. So there was a very, that's also the reason why it's the first track. I think because it is the first track of the album as well.
Yeah, it's do you know what? You're not overly reliant on those bottom two strings of your guitar because Thomas is doing the chugging. And I think
Yeah.
it's great. And that to me, that is a classic noise rock sound. I mean, Thomas, do you know that New York band, Couch Slut? Have you heard that band?
Yeah.
I've just reviewed their new album. They do that very effectively. The guitar players are just offended by anything melodic that might come out of their amps. So they spend most of the time trying to like put it back into the amp, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
destroy it.
But
And the
it's
bass is playing
actually
the riffs.
it's another New York band that influenced this song. The riff anyway. The early Helmet stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Meantime.
The Strap It On album.
Oh, okay.
I've been trying to get Peter the drummer to do something like that,
Yeah.
and yeah, he doesn't want that simplistic stuff. He wants it to be broader in some way, but I'm really happy that we got him to do it. So yeah, we've been wanting to make something that was simple and punchy and had a little bit. It's not very dynamic, but it's very much beating you over the head.
Yeah.
In a, yeah, it's that's the helmet in me, I think, trying to get out. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to arrange an interview with Paige Hamilton to do a feature about 7 records that were influenced by that Meantime album that I have in my collection. And
Yeah.
the plan is to just talk through how these bands have taken that helmet sound and what he thinks of it. So yeah, a great band. The other thing I noticed on here, I called it, there's like a neo-industrial entanglement of bass and drums throughout. Like it's abstract, but so unpretentious. You know, it's just like you say, just hits you over the head. But it is still quite sophisticated music, even though you're trying to go for this overflow of noise.
Yeah, I think I think that comes down to sort of, as you say, like there is we've talked about it earlier. There is this sort of, we all have different backgrounds and we all sort of want to do different things, but we want to do them together. And I think that combination is also what shows here, right?
Yeah,
I actually think the whole idea about playing against each other is like something. I think it's an old I think it's an old Nirvana interview where one of them says that, like, well, the whole idea of Nirvana is trying to play against each other. And Peter, the drummer, who's a huge Nirvana fan, also I remember him sort of showing us that interview. This is what we got to do when we were
yeah,
writing this record. And I think this idea that, like, we follow each other and at different parts of the song, and then we don't follow each other, and like sometimes Thomas and Peter will be very sort of locked in and have a groove. Other times it will be sort of me and Peter's. Other times again, it will be nobody. And like it's so I think this, and I think we we want it to be very sort of brute in a sense, very primitive, but it's not because we're just hammering on like our instruments on open strings. We're actually trying to make something that locks in and that has different forms of chord patterns and that weave in and out of each other. So we try to make it complex, but we try to make it complex in a way that's very intuitive. We don't want to overthink it. Like
No.
we don't want to write like a dream theater song, right? We want to write something that's very, very sort of brutal, but very sort of but still has some complexity. That there needs to be something to find in the music beyond just the like it's nice when people hear the record and then they listen to it one time and they go, I have no idea what I just listened to. I'm scared. I'm sort of I don't know what happened. And then they listen to it a couple more times and then they realize there's stuff in there that they can actually make out and like, oh, this is what happens. And this is actually pretty deep. I think that's something that I think it's something we do without really thinking about doing it.
Yeah, I think it's like when you hear that Meshuggah EP, have you ever heard that EP?
Yeah.
That is insane. And I remember seeing the interview for that, and Thomas, the drummer, said he was given these guitar tracks and he wanted to play away from the rhythms. And when you play that, the guitar playing doesn't sound that complicated, but when you just think of the mathematical counting, I don't even think they overthink. I don't think they overthink it either. Some
No.
of that you put that on, and you're just like, what is going on here? And yeah, that I can. You're right. There are elements in your music where you're doing that as well. So when you said playing against each other, but also away from each other as well, and
It's
yeah,
quite, I think, a way to explain it is stripped down.
Mm,
Um, it's not really simple, but it's stripped down. It's a very economic way of writing.
mm,
mm,
There's not a lot of bells and whistles on it, and I like that. I
mm.
like that in music when it just cuts to the bone. And I definitely think that this track does exactly that.
yeah. So track number three, I'm guessing, does that translate from Danish to English as dead,
Yeah,
dirt?
yeah, death.
Yeah,
Yeah,
death.
Death or dead and yeah.
Yeah, because the German word is turd, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, I think the bass it really stands out again in this song. And I said that you're having the time of your life on this song on bass, but not that there's anything experimental about your playing. It's just right down the center, isn't it? But
yeah.
the tone is hostile, and I've also said that, yeah, your guitars, Peter, they kind of act like these intervals that screech and ache like detuned sirens.
Mm,
Like it's got this paranoia sense in there, hasn't it?
yeah.
What was this one that you nailed in the rehearsal room after two or three times and then deconstructed and put it back together? How did this one come about, this song?
I think this is one of those, yeah, as you say, where we had different parts that we tried and to put together in different ways. I think as soon as we got the like the what you might call the verse rhythm, as soon as that locked in, I think everything else sort of okay, now we know what we're doing. I remember writing the first guitar riff was very I think I'd been listening to a lot of Sumac at the time, so I wanted to write something that was very sort of errant. I don't know I don't know if I succeeded, but at least that's what I was trying to that was what I was aiming for. So it is just this very it is a sort of very chugga riff, but it is it in a very sort of non-chugga way, more like a very sort of way,
Yeah.
because because like all the chords are even more dissonant than the ones in Autophagia. They're it's just built around two chords are that don't sound well in any context. And then this sort of rhythm that just keeps pounding through the intro, through the verse, and then back. And um, so I think we had the first part down, and then we played that endlessly before we came up with like the second half. And the second half is, I think the second half of the song is probably some of it, at least the outro, the long outro is some of the stuff that's most sort of, at least if you talk like tempo wise and sort of mood wise, the biggest shifts on the album. Like we there's more sort of, yeah, there's more changes in the beats and stuff in the second half. And so the song is very much like there's a first half where I do the vocals, and then there's like a change in the middle where the bass is alone, and then it's sort of, that's how Thomas enters the song. So it's very much almost like two different songs that we've sort of spliced together, and then there's like a small callback at the end to the rest of the song. And I think the thing was that like the first guitar riffs I wrote were like, I want to write something that sounds like Sumac, and then the last ones were like, I want to write something that sounds like Black Sheep Wall, and then like those things were two different things, and then we started writing, and then they ended up in the same song. Yeah, so it was very much a thing where we took different parts and experimented and then jammed them together.
Yeah, I like the next song on this track number four, Fawn.
Mm,
I've listened to this quite a few times. I remember the first time I heard it, these were my original notes because I was talking about how the music you externalize anxieties. But this one starts with like ambient amplifier noise, doesn't it? And there's this really interesting atonal arpeggio that almost has a bit of melody in it,
mm.
doesn't it? And again, the bass is carrying it, but it's quite harrowing as well, this song. And what came to my mind, Thomas, you're a painter, so you'll always have images. When I listen to an album, I'll just write down what comes into my head. This one, I just had this image of these coal miners that were trapped underground and couldn't get out, and they were just screaming, and the projection of their voice was just diminishing, because they're going to starve to death if people can't get down there and they have no energy.
Mm.
So it's quite there's a real developed sense of claustrophobia still, isn't there, on this song? Who is this? Are any of these songs written by one of you guys at home on a demo, or does it always come about in a rehearsal room?
I think we write riffs at home, and then we meet up in the rehearsal place, and then we just throw all the riffs in a big pot, and then we figure out which ones do we like, and then we sort of write songs around those ideas.
But we tend to discard a lot of riffs.
Yeah,
We've even discarded whole songs,
yeah, yeah.
just because everything wasn't exactly like we wanted it. A track like Form, I think you either get it or you don't, because it's very stripped down. It's very atmospheric.
Yeah.
And it's definitely one of the most anguished tracks on the album, I think. But I think for the most part, if you're really into metal, you might not go for a song like that. But I think the how you described it works really well for me.
Yeah. Yeah, also because there's like this line in the song that about this life is a collective grave, so that makes
It
sense.
kind of makes
Yeah,
a lot more sense than you think.
yeah. I think it's like the other songs, I remember writing that chord, like that riff that opens the song. But this time, like contrary to the other tracks, I wasn't aiming for anything. It was not, I wasn't writing that and thinking I want this to sound like something else. I was just sitting at home, I think, noodling, again, trying to like, I'm constantly trying to figure out the most annoying ways to make chords.
Yeah.
Like one of the things I set up as an obstacle for myself while writing this was that I was I was not allowed to do any power chords. I couldn't do any classic power chords like this. I didn't succeed. There are some of them on the album, but all the riffs are sort of written with that in mind. You can't take an easy way out. You have to write something. You have to take a chord you haven't used before, and you have to make it sound horrible. So that was the whole idea behind writing these things. That's also the idea behind that specific chord that carries through. Like I play the same thing through the entire first half of the song, and then there's a small part in the middle where there's just a sort of soft guitar and Thomas, and that's the only variation. Otherwise, it's just 3 minutes of me playing the same chord, and everything, all the dynamics in the song are up to Thomas and Peter on the drum and bass, and I just hover like above it, making that horrible sound for like 3 minutes. I think unconsciously that's been a driving force, trying to figure out things that just sound great but in a horrible way. So this idea that there's sort of a melody in it, but the melody is really not, it's not very pleasant. There isn't any resolve in the melody. It's not like the guitar suddenly makes a chord change and then you arrive back at a nice place with the chord changes. It's just it keeps going. It's very sort of hypnotic in a sense. You're trapped. I like this. I like this
Yeah,
painting about being trapped in the Coleman.
yeah, yeah.
Like you're just
Me as well.
trapped with this sound forever, right? I really like that sort of thinking about sort of dragging things out and sort of really underscoring that yes, we want you to feel bad about this. Listen to this very terrible chord. And then when the song changes, there's this big power ending with like with a lot of octave chords on the guitar that just float around, and it becomes very big. And then the final, I remember the final riff is sort of, I wanted to write a riff that was, and then this is a riff that was from something else where I was listening a bunch to like Kowloon, and I wanted to make a riff that sounded like Scott Evans wrote it. And I didn't do that but that's the ending riff is sort of, it's basically a riff from what could be a completely different song, but it sort of in many ways still matches because it it opens the song up in a different way, right? It's sort of it's a reward at the end after listening to like 3 minutes of this terrible chord.
Yeah, I picked up on that. The sliding octaves. That always reminds me of the Smashing Pumpkins.
Yeah,
You know, those octave chords sliding.
which I've never listened to Smashing
You
Pumpkins.
know,
Like it's
yeah,
never been a thing.
they used to do that, and
Yeah,
yeah, it does bring a bit of melody in that, doesn't it? Almost like a bit of relief from the
yeah.
tension, and then the end is like a human stampede, isn't it? On that. So we move on to the next song. I'm guessing is it pronounced decomposition or decomposition?
Yeah, decomposition.
Decomposition. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, the chord choice is really interesting. Have you ever do you ever listen to Killing Joke?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Killing Joke and Neurosis I picked up in this song. Really interesting. Yeah, do you want to talk us through this one, Thomas? Decomposition.
Oh, yeah. I think that's very hard because it's a sprawling song in a
Mm,
way. A lot of stuff happens in it. I think the main bass riff is a variation of a song actually from one of the earlier albums. I like kind of doing some continuity. Um, and I think my favorite part of the song is I get to do some sliding on the bass.
mm.
um, but that's definitely one of the songs where we play against each other almost exclusively during the entire song. Um, yeah, I don't really know how to describe it. I think I need some help from Peter.
I
Yeah,
think I think one of the things we all thought was very, very interesting about writing a song is like the 2 minute noise part at the end. And I think we all wanted when we wrote when we wrote that part, when we decided on putting that part in there, we were all very focused on we wanted something that would translate to a live setting where we could sort of not sort of focus on playing in the correct tempo or anything. We wanted a very sort of open space where we could improvise.
Yeah, just to free everything up.
Yeah.
Because everything else on the album is very just like a punch press,
Mm.
very tight. I'm a huge fan of improv as
Mm.
well, and just the sound of the actual room, the instruments, just the scraping on the bass. You can hear little things in there like just uh, fingers accidentally touching the strings and stuff. It's probably my favorite part of the on the entire album is the that ambient
Yeah.
improvised part. Um, it's so very detailed in a strange way.
Mm.
That was one of the things that when we talked about the mixing and the mastering, that we had very clear ideas about what we wanted to come through in the mix. Um, yeah, I just love the not a lot of stuff is happening on it. The drums are just rolling, and Peter's guitars are floating kind
Yeah.
of in the background. Uh, and the way it's panned, um, yeah, I really really enjoy that. I hope we can do something more like that stuff in the future.
Yeah.
And also, it frees us up when we play live. We can make it last for as long as it has to.
Yeah.
It all depends on where we're at on stage. So yeah, I really enjoyed that we made a decision to free it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's one of my favorite tracks on the album. We've played it live a couple of times, and we're going to do so at the Colossal Weekend. So hopefully we get to play really loud.
Yeah. I think, and I also think, I think I think what I really like about having that part in that song is that it's a very busy song, right? It's a
Yeah,
lot of stuff going on up until that point, a lot of different changes, a lot of different sort of riffs. And I remember this. I actually remember writing the beginning riff and like the first part of the song alone in the rehearsal space before the other guys showed up and recording it and sitting. I remember sort of we talked about, oh, that riff has like I remember somebody saying it has like "Today is the day" vibes, the
Yeah.
opening
Yeah.
riffs. And then it completely changed when we started rehearsing. Like when the original things I wrote are still in there, all the chords are in there, but the way it feels and the way it came out is completely different to how I first had it in my head when I wrote it, which is what I think is great about doing it the way we do it. It's like I might have an idea, and then when I play it, the other guys completely fuck it up, and which is brilliant. Like that's what makes that's what makes it interesting all the time. But I think it's a song that I think on this song we're also pushing the limits of what we in a sense can do, not like technically, but more like this is, as I said, it's a busy song. There's a lot of stuff going on, and contrary to the other tracks where it's just like we're doing this riff and now we're doing this riff for 3 minutes, this song is like we're changing riffs, we're changing riffs. So it has a completely different approach to what we're doing, right? And the only time it actually relaxes is when this improvised part shows up, and the whole improvised part is like a first take. It's just the sound you hear in that part is my guitar DI into a an amp, that's being recorded while Peter's in the recording room, just pounding on the drums, and then that's it. Like everything else is another layer of guitar around and stuff like that. But that part is just the first take when we did it. Um, so it's also a song that's like patched together in some senses, recording wise.
Yeah, it's an interesting song, isn't it? Because when we go on to the penultimate track, Korkom, I believe, is that how it's pronounced? Or Korkom?
Cocoon.
Cocoon.
Yeah, it's a cocoon.
Yeah, it's a
Is
cocoon.
is that a Danish word? It doesn't look
Yeah,
Danish. It doesn't look
yeah.
Germanic. The spelling of it, does it? Oh, okay. Korkom. Yeah. Because this is one, Thomas, where Ken Mode came to mind when I was listening to it. I really like that band, Ken Mode. I think they're fantastic. But surprisingly, there is a bit of emphasis, I thought, on guitar extravagance, but there's no showmanship in your music. It's really interesting. You've not just done the post-metal thing, which you said there before, you don't want to play any power chords. And with this type of music, you're absolutely determined to never play any pentatonic scales, it seems as well. I think that's what separates post-metal, isn't it, from just about every other genre within that spectrum. What about those ominous piano parts at the end? It's quite morbid, the ending. Who played those parts?
The piano is me, and the piano is actually we discussed forever when we were supposed to put the piano on the album. It was supposed to come earlier, or it was so the basically the piano chords at the end of that song are the same chords that end the next track, where it's just where it's just guitar and bass, and there's also a piano in there somewhere. But the piano parts are again a bunch of not very nice sounding chords. Like there's some of it is nice, and then a bunch of embellishments that make it sound off. And the trick was that in the recording studio, Dead Rat Studios, which is Jakob Breda's studios, there is an old piano that's just sitting in the room that just like I think it's something that's just been there forever, and he's never had it tuned. So everything just sounds ominous on it, right? Like you could play whatever happy tune, it would still sound scary on the piano. And I remember we wrote that piano part and tried to figure out how to write it and where to place it while because we lived in the studio while we were recording. So we just when we were alone at night, we just came up with that and just recorded it on our phone, and then we did the recording next day when Jakob was back. But the reason why we discussed it is it because it is a way of hinting at how the album ends. Like those chords are the ending of the album, and so they are. That's why it's the bridge into the next song. I also think when you said about like you said there's some guitar showmanship in the Cocoon song. Um I think the riff sounds more difficult than it is. Like I think that I use a lot of tricks, which is just basically that like it's a fast riff, but it's not like a technical riff. It's just a riff that again I was very determined to write something that was fast, but was fast in a way that wasn't sort of, let's see how fast I can speed pick. Let's just see how fast I can make a really awful chord go back and forth. And that's basically what the riff is. Uh, and the whole sort of what we might call the chorus is just one chord with one tonal shift, that just goes back and forth. And then the whole last part of the song is just like a long breakdown, like me listening to Eagles Become Vultures with Converge and just wanting to write something that has that feeling. Yeah,
Yeah, no, it's certainly an event on the album. Like you said, that actually leads into the closing track, doesn't it? Transformation or transformation.
yeah.
And this one's to me, this is the most complex song. There are a lot of offbeats in the drum work on
Mm.
this, and yeah, I remember having to play it again just to think what is going on here, and didn't still haven't really worked it out. And that's a good thing in my opinion. You know, when you just like, I don't think you're trying to create a puzzle. Don't get me wrong. I don't think you're trying to do that. But this is quite a challenging song. Obviously, it is because of the emotion and the aggression. There's quite, am I right in thinking there's quite a lot of like syncopated guitar work in this song, isn't there, as well? It to me, I think I ended the review by saying, "Are you strong enough to survive a song like this?" And I'm guessing you'll see that as a compliment, won't you, if the
Yeah,
listener
yeah, definitely.
throwing that question back at you.
Yeah. I think yeah, that's what we're aiming for, right? Like making it uncomfortable. I keep coming back. Okay, this is like Thomas will laugh because he's heard me say it like a bunch of times. Like one of the first reviews we got when I got in the band, we did a live show, and the review afterwards said, like, he gave us a very good review, and he said this show was like a 20-minute, 25-minute showcase show. He said the entire 25 minute set was just like watching one long, painful scream. Like it's the best. It's like a best review I've ever got from anything I've ever done. And I think that's what we're aiming for. I think not the very last sort of doom part of the song, but the part right before is weird because we're counting three different time signatures, right? So I'm counting eight. I don't know what Peter is counting, and I have no idea if Thomas is even counting.
Not
So
counting.
no, he's not counting. So it's like it's three different things. We have three different rhythmic sort of orientations when the drums and bass kick in,
But
and
it's
that's
kind of
what
like,
makes it
yeah,
weird, right?
it's playing with time,
Yeah.
slowing time down, in the front end, uh, and what Peter does with the drums in the heavy part,
Mm,
just holding it and holding it and holding it. It's like, yeah, a manipulation of time, just like a band like Carnate is really good at that.
mm,
Yeah.
So that was definitely an inspiration for that track, I think.
mm,
Um, but also some things just require patience, and we did that with the closing track on Sul as well.
mm,
And it's not easy to just sit there and just listen if you're I love vinyl. I'm an old guy, so I listen to entire albums, entire
mm,
sides, from start to end, and that's kind of important to me. Just to you get the full journey, kind of. Um, but it's not crowd pleasing in any way with the long intro from Peter. Um, and the way we just ended, bang, on the with the piano, underlaying piano. It's got this ambience to it, that old piano. I remember lying on the floor actually when you were playing it. It was just so deep and vibrant, really resonant.
mm.
And I think that feeling kind of comes across in the ending of that track, and I'm really satisfied that we kind of nailed it. Um, that feeling anyway.
Do you think you'll do that on the next record, Sleep in the Studio? You know, I'm guessing you have this in your calendar in advance. You book time off work. You know you're going to be away from your family. There's probably a bit of liberation there, isn't it? How long
Yes.
were you in the studio? Was it 5 days?
I think I think we spent total a total of 6 or 7 days recording, but we did it on in two runs. So the first one we stayed there for 4 days and slept in the studio, and we just left once in a while to get food. And then we came back and did 2 or 3 days more where we also slept in the studio. And I think we all agree that we want to do it the same way the next time. Like I think as you say, there's something liberating about it, but there's also something very like there's this idea that you're trapped inside this
Yeah, it's
creative
like a
process.
confinement.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
Like
yeah,
this is you have this, it becomes sort of hyper focused, right? You're doing this one thing. You're making this album, and that's the only thing you have to worry about now. And when we're not recording, you're still in the studio. You still have all the equipment. You still have all the time in the world to think about stuff, write lyrics, come up with ideas. I think that opens up an entirely new way of sort of being in the studio. Like the Sult album was recorded in 4 days in our hometown in a really fucking great studio. But like you said, like the days were long, but we got home, right? Every night we went home, we slept, we got up, had breakfast with our families, and then we left for the studio again, which is nice. I like being with my family, but like this idea that I guess the same as when you go touring, right? You become so intensely focused on this one thing you have to do. That's all you have to do, and then it sort of it takes on a completely sort of different it's just a completely different way of being in that process because there is nothing else but that process, right?
Can't
So
escape it, and you have to get it done.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of a cliche, but it's definitely a struggle because people come up with new ideas, and we discuss how to end things and how to change things in the studio as well. So I think it can get quite tense. Emotions run high, and but we know we have to get it done. So
mm,
it's just like Peter said, it's hyper focused, and I really like that. This kind of it's a feeling like you have no escape.
mm,
This is something we need to hunker down and just get done, and we have to get it done right. And I really enjoyed the intensity of it. Um, when we're speaking about writing a new material, but maybe we'll just get out of town and rent a house in the woods or something, just to yeah, just to have that trapped feeling again. It kind of works for us.
yeah,
You're very much like your ninth century Danish ancestors when they came to England.
yeah,
They burned their boats, didn't they? So they had
yeah.
to come and
We're
conquer
never
the
leaving.
territory.
Yeah,
We've no choice now. We're going to have
yeah.
to stay
We
here.
just have to stick it out.
Yeah.
I think I'm really happy about, as Thomas said, like we did this on we did it on the last record, and I don't know if we'll do it on the next one, but I'm really happy about this ending, right? I think the this idea of like some of the other songs, like this guitar intro is really long, right? It just goes on and you have no idea for such a long time about where am I actually going? What is this? Is this gonna amount to anything at all? Um, and I just think I really think the because there's basically just three parts to that song. Right? There's a really long guitar intro, and then there's this really syncopated sort of actually a really groovy drum uh, part, and then this huge like open doom part at the end, which was like very also it's also very abandoned inspired and stuff like that. And I think I think there's sort of at least when I listen back to it, I think there's very much for me. It's a very gratifying ending to the album. Like, I think it feels like if somebody listens to the entire album and gets there, I think they've earned it in some sense, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the idea as well for us when we reach that part of the album. There has to be this sense of okay, now we've earned this call it catharsis or call it ending or call it whatever you want. But like I think that's the move we're going for, right? Like the last sort of death spasms, right? Like and then that's the whole idea, I think.
Yeah, I've just got one more question then, and we can use it for the last two songs. You said, Thomas, it's an effect like you've got to slow down time. So I've got two questions on that actually. One, is that an analogy for what you were going through as a band or as individuals that you were in this place in your life where you needed to do that? And have you consciously done that musically? as an analogy for trying to do that, as some kind of survival mechanism.
That's an interesting thought.
Mm.
I think we can all agree that we're very busy. We lead very busy lives. And yeah, I think you're onto something regarding just being in the moment. That's something that me personally, I really, really try, and I work on it all the time just to slow down and stay grounded, and yeah, not let everything just fly by me. It's a very difficult thing to do, I think, especially now with two kids and yeah, mortgages and everything. But it's also like putting on an album. You kind of commit to it.
Yeah.
You have to sit there and you have to get involved with it, and that's something I think that in some way everyone should do. So yeah, I think you're onto something with the final track. I don't the gratification like the Peter talked about. I'm not sure that it's necessary. Just getting pulled in and held down in some way, just being forced to just listen. I think that's more of a that's more of a goal in my mind anyway. Um, it's not supposed to be entertaining, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, music, the best music is often immersive, isn't it?
Yeah.
And yours is, despite the high levels of aggression, there are a lot of peaks and troughs in the dynamics. And as we said, there's some really honest moments where you're looking for solitude as well. And that's what I like about this music. Yeah. So I think we better wrap it up though, because Peter, aren't you at a works party or something?
Yeah, I think I
You've got to
left the
go back
party
out,
to
haven't you, to be with your colleagues?
I left the party to do this instead. Yeah.
Yeah. I hope it's not too late for you to go back to the bar and then join
No, no problem.
couple more beers. But thank you very much for joining us. It's an absolute honor to have you on the Behind the Album series for Scream Blast Repeat. It is an honor that we only invite to bands who produce truly great works of art. To boil it down to a metric, you need to score 8 out of 10 in one of our reviews to qualify. So I know you hate that, having your art given a number. The reality is, I think for our readers, sometimes they will scroll to the bottom and then they'll think, oh, 8 out of 10, I'll read this review.
Yeah.
Even do that. So I know I've compromised there, but yeah, for our viewers then, the album "Ah," what does it actually mean? That it's a Danish word. What does it mean in English? Is it just an exasperation? It's
It
like,
means a scar or scars.
oh, okay, like
Yeah.
a physical wound, a scar.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. So the album's called "Ah," and it's released by Fushusk Format Records. And it came out on the 8th of March. Vinyl, is it on CD as well?
No.
No. See, I'm an old guy, but I go for CDs rather than vinyl. So
We don't do CDs. We never done a CD. Like we
yeah.
only do vinyl and digital. Like
Yeah.
we talked a bunch about doing tapes because I think that's very hip, but we haven't gotten around to it.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely going to be a contender for album of the year. For Scream Blast Repeat, we do a top 50 albums. Number one last year was Pupil Slicer. A band who I think you've got some similarities with in terms of emotional content, not necessarily musically, but they'd be a band you could share the stage with. I'm gonna have to say it though. Do you know what would be a great tour? Kollapse Denmark and Kollapse Sweden. I would just
talked about that.
Everyone.
No, we should do the all three, right? We should do
the Australian
Kollapse.
band.
Yeah, the Australian Kollapse as well. Yeah.
3 collapses in one night.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for coming on the channel, and I hope you enjoy the rest of
it.
your
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.